ich mich wohl.
Welcome to Pixel Pizza,
Did she say pizza?
your ultimate source for chiptunes, video game talk, and pepperoni. Delivered to you from Los Angeles and into the digital cyberspace of the 2020s.
Pizza power!
That's right, one super giant pizza.
I want a large, thick crust with double cheese, ham, pepperoni. Hey, where's my pizza? Pizza time.
Welcome back to the Pixel Pizza podcast, listeners. You just heard from our chiptune artist this week, Thefricolix, and that track was called Unbound. So hope you enjoyed that one. And now we are here with our video game developer guest this week. He is the CEO and founder of Unbound Creations, who you may know from their work on the games Headliner, Rain on Your Parade, and the upcoming Just Crow Things. This is Jakub Kasztalski. How are you doing, Jakub?
Hello. Nice to meet all of you.
Everyone says nice to meet you too, I'm sure. And so we like to get started by asking, when in your life did you know you wanted to work in games?
Honestly, I think I was always kind of a nerd. Even as a little kid, I spent more time playing with like map editors for various games than playing them. I remember, I'm a millennial, so I remember playing StarCraft, the original one, and I spent so much time with the map editor, making my own scenarios, making my little bootleg, almost like RPG systems in it. And yeah, I definitely spent more time in the editor than actually playing the game itself. So I think that's something that's always been a part of me.
That's great. And yeah, when did you sort of step into it formally?
So I've kind of had, I guess, my first break when I was in college. In my after my sophomore year, when I did an internship, that was back in California, where I was studying, and I continued working kind of remotely while I was finishing school. Then I kind of like traveled a bit. I also explored filmmaking, which is another one of my big passions. And then I released my first independent game and kind of like established my studio in 2013. So I guess that's kind of like my origin story.
How would you say that filmmaking kind of inspired your game development?
I think there's definitely some overlap as far as like storytelling elements. But for me personally, I was a little bit more on I didn't want to be a director. I didn't want to be a story writer or an actor. I wanted to be a cinematographer,
Mm.
which is camera and lighting, all that kind of stuff, the visual stuff. Which is also ironic because when it comes to games, I am not an artist and I'm just like terrible with my programmer art. But I do think I have a strong vision as a kind of a creative director, which is my role now. Even on my first game, I would come up, with mock-ups and early prototypes that if you compared all my placeholder art and stuff to the final stuff that my artists created, I think there's a lot of like the vision is very clear and very strong. And I think that's kind of been my power that I'm, similar to cinematography, I can kind of visualize and communicate that to the rest of my team. And I think that's maybe sort of like the biggest overlap and also the biggest strength of being someone in my position running my own studio.
Definitely. Do you ever storyboard or things like that?
Oh yes, absolutely. There's definitely a period of just googling random images,
Mm.
brainstorming ideas, just having entire folders of stuff. There's definitely a big element of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's when I was in game development for a little while, I would use PowerPoint presentations and clip art and yeah, just ways to explain how I was envisioning things in my head to my team.
Definitely.
Yeah, so then I was curious to know, I know some of your work has been featured in museums and used as a teaching tool in classrooms.
hmm
And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so that mostly refers to some of my other serious games. So what listeners might not realize is that I've published under our studio 6 commercial games, and we're actually just about to release our seventh. We just announced Shameless Pitch, Just Grow Things, coming out on August 15th on PC,
Mhm.
Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. And that's a very silly game. But I've also done a lot of kind of serious political and social commentary games as well. And it's always kind of been like this mix between doing silly, colorful, fun games, but doing something like very serious and thought-provoking. So 2 games that got most recognition for that are called Headliner and Headliner Novi News, which are games where you play as a news editor. You kind of decide which articles to publish every day, and then you walk through the city, the nation you're part of, and you kind of see how it changes every day. You talk to the
Mm.
people, you see how it influences everyday life. So it is kind of a game about how media and media bias shape society around us. And it definitely was heavily inspired by games like Papers, Please, too, where you're always put in those difficult choices and you have to make trade-offs between what you personally believe, what your news agency needs, as far as like sponsorships and funding, what maybe your loved ones need and what would benefit them. So it's about creating that kind of like internal conflict and making people understand why this sort of media bias arises, and what the effects are of that, which naturally lends itself well to being sort of a teaching aid, especially in this day and age.
Right.
I've always tried to get my games more into schools. So if anyone's listening and wants to use our games, a teaching aid about media literacy or anything like that, please reach out to me. But it has been used in a few cases in this way, as a sort of an extra tool in a class about media bias. It was also featured at the Australian Museum of Moving Images, I believe,
Oh, wow.
or Moving Pictures. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name right now. Which unfortunately was going to be available just as the pandemic hit, so it was only there
Mm.
virtually. Um, and of course, my games also were shown in like a lot of smaller showcases, small little art house type events here in Seattle.
I think as you were touching on, it is so important, more so now in today's day and age. I mean, you made the original headliner, I think like 10 years ago now.
Yeah, it was, I think the original was like 2017, and then the
Okay.
second one was 2018, which is coming up to 10 years pretty soon.
Yeah. Oh, I don't, 2017, I don't want to think about that being so, so close to
Yeah.
10 years. But yeah, with, AI and deep faking and so many different technologies to forge stories in the news and alter the truth, it's an even
Hmm.
more frightening time. So it's a very poignant
Hmm.
game that you created.
Thank you.
But yeah, as you were saying, your studio has a very unique sort of balance where you make these serious social commentary games, but you also make very silly and cartoony games. Uh, and they are also, about a lot about disruption and wreaking havoc. And I was wondering if there is sort of any ways you feel that comedy is also able to deliver like social or political messages.
I think definitely, I think there's, definitely a lot of comedic movies that can have very serious elements. And, even in my serious games, there were, some jokes, some
Mm.
references, some spoofs like that. Right now, with our current games, like Rain in Your Parade and the upcoming one, Just Crow Things, that one is meant to be, just plain fine and silly. We kind of thought about ideas about, maybe some kind of like environmental messages, since, we play in one as a cloud, so we're kind of like the force of nature, and the second one is play as a crow.
Hmm.
But ultimately, we just wanted to stick to those games being kind of just like a fun fantasy, an escape from the world. Whereas the headliner games were very much a reminder of what is going in the world. These games were meant to be just, I don't want to worry about climate change and environmental destruction and politics. I just want to
Yeah.
play as a fun crow.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about the development timeline, when I saw when Rain on Your Parade came out, I was like, oh, maybe it's because of 2020 and things being so overwhelming that you just needed a very light game to give yourself some fun. I don't know.
Yeah, and especially after working with the two headliners, where, I did follow the news circuit very closely.
Mm.
I've followed a variety of different, social medias from like Facebooks and Reddits, different subreddits, different communities there. I went actually to a journalism conference in Boston as well.
Oh, wow.
So I've done a lot of research, and, I was kind of like part of that ecosystem for a while, and it just, it was just so exhausting. You start seeing, the all the issues with that, the biases,
Oh,
the
yeah.
problems. And I was just, that was also like, around like Trump elections and all that stuff
Yeah.
happening and the fake news being a thing. And it
Mhm.
just, I've definitely felt a bit burned out being, and I feel like definitely made me a little bit more jaded and cynical. So that's why I was like, okay, I need to do something dumb and colorful next. And that's kind of when I moved to Rain on Your Parade. And afterwards, I actually did make another game that was more of a solo, smaller project called Leaf Blower Man. This game blows. And that's an example of actually a funny game, but it's also kind of a commentary game. And without giving too many spoilers, the game is free to play. So, you can go to Steam and you can play it. And it's ad supported, but the ads are not quite what you might think at first. And that's a little bit more what the game is about, and kind
Mhm.
of tries to send a message. So that's actually, yeah, that's a good answer to your earlier question. Like, that's a
Yeah.
great example of a game that's both funny and comical, but also trying to make a point. But I don't know how much you want me to spoil that.
However much you feel comfortable spoiling. Uh, but yeah, I was a journalism minor when I was in college in Boston, and I remember going around and, reporting on local stories and national stories and going to City Hall and doing all this stuff. And yeah, it was so exhausting. It was very clear to me after a couple of semesters that this is not something I could pursue as a career just because of the stomach it takes to
Hmm.
constantly be covering these intense stories that certainly need to be told. And so many props to the people who pursue that for a living. But
Hmm.
it really, it takes a toll on your psyche to be in all of that.
Definitely, especially with a lot of conflicting incentives. We see so much clickbait stuff out
Yes.
there, but a lot of, outlets rely on clickbait. It almost becomes a necessity. And we see it too with, I don't know, YouTube thumbnails, that those kind of, exaggerated clickbaity things just perform better. And it's hard not to do that when you kind of have to. Everyone else is doing it, and it becomes this whole pressure to kind of sacrifice a little bit of maybe your quality or your honesty, to kind of like and get that attention, which especially if your website is ad based, it's you're just desperate for those clicks if you actually want to survive. It's it's really hard in the current ecosystem.
Yeah, it's really, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because they
Hmm.
certainly need to make money to keep the thing going, but also you need to be truthful to your
Hmm.
readers.
Hmm.
I did watch a video recently that I thought was really insightful. I mean, it was also funny, but it was about how so many YouTube thumbnails can be boiled down to like one of three templates where it's
Hmm.
usually like maybe you have like three people's faces and they look
Hmm.
intense and it's like a dark background for like a drama video, or you have somebody in like a dangerous situation for like a Mr. Beast type video.
Yep, yep. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it definitely changed the way I look at all of that and see people trying to vie for my attention.
Hmm.
But yeah, getting more into Rain on Your Parade, I think one of the things that stands out about it is the cool sort of mixed media art style you have with
Hmm.
cardboard cloud and, 3D environments and people. And
Hmm.
I know that you gave a talk on sort of that subject about using like different assets at a
Hmm.
conference. And yeah, so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of how you achieve that effect because it is so cool.
Thank you. And also, yeah, you've done your research. Nice.
I try.
Yeah. So, Rainy Parade kind of went through, a little bit, a huge overhaul halfway through. Initially, it was a little bit more like a flat shaded game with a lot more crude sense of humor. It was a lot more of a kind of like a South Park or Adult Swim type of a game. Um, and it didn't do great when we first announced it. I didn't feel like we were kind of getting traction. And I remember exhibiting it for the first time at DreamHack, and I noticed that a lot of kids would come to our booth. They would play the game, then they would come back an hour later, bring their other friends, and the parents would stand with the kid and just they would watch their child play the game and would laugh at the jokes happening on the screen while the kid was playing.
Mm.
And I kind of had an epiphany that like, wait, is this a kids game? Are we making a kids game? And that's kind of where I decided to make this sharp pivot into this more kind of like a colorful and silly aesthetic. It kind of has like a meta story of being a little kid listening to a bedtime story by his grandpa about this little
Mm.
mean cloud going on this world-trotting adventure to find the mysterious Seattle, the land of the clouds. And that is very heavily inspired by Princess Bride, the movie, excellent movie, which kind of
Yeah.
has a very similar narrative. So that's kind of what lent itself to the idea that, if they're all kind of like this imaginary story by a little boy, then, it makes sense that it would be all kind of like a little kind of paper craft and it'd be like very toy-like. And around the time was also the release of Link's Awakening on the reboot on
Oh,
Nintendo
sure.
Switch, which is one of my favorite Zelda games. And they also have that kind of like the miniature art style that I just completely love that. And other games, like Yoshi's Woolly World, Paper Mario, I just kind of fell in love with that style, and it just seemed to lend itself really well to this idea narratively and cohesively, and it gave the game a very unique identity that we just kind of rolled with.
Definitely. I love that handmade kind of art style. And
Hmm.
it's funny that I can definitely imagine kids having that justification and reason why Seattle would be so rainy and
Hmm.
gloomy, but the game is also, when it launched, it's been available on Game Pass. And I'm
Hmm.
curious sort of how that impact its popularity and play rate and stuff.
I think that definitely increased our um, exposure. I think I forget the current numbers, but I know like I think like maybe like a month after a month or two, we hit like something like 400,000 players just for Game Pass. Which is pretty staggering. It
Mm.
was interesting as soon as it launched. I actually kind of messed up about the time zones, and I didn't realize that I was launching the game in the wrong time zone. So it launched the night before we expected it to launch. So all of a sudden at night, I started getting a flurry of tweets at our account, and people were posting screenshots and
Whoa.
jokes and memes, and I was like, and it was just like this for next few weeks. It was this flurry of updates. And we put also like a photo mode and encourage players to share it with us. And the game being very silly and letting you also draw your own face on the cloud. There were a lot of people who would like only spend a lot of time drawing very very intricate faces that I didn't know was even possible with the very rudimentary tools that we gave players. That was wholly impressive. Um, so I think that yeah, just it just gave us such a wider audience, and I think a lot of what I kind of mentioned and was expecting a lot of it was parents playing with their kids, either together or sharing what their kid did, or exchanging joysticks. So I feel like kind of banking on that was also a great fit for Game Pass, and that was definitely a big part of our audience there.
Totally. It lends itself so well to those sort of quick, bite-sized experiences you
Hmm.
can get in and out of. Were there any funny stories on the development side of making a game with all the destructible environments and things like that?
I got one for Just Crow things.
Mm-hmm.
There was one point where we had a weird bug where sometimes when you pooped on something, because you're a crow, you can poop on things, that item would just keep moving indefinitely. Like it would just keep rolling around the other map. And then when it hit other things, it would kind of knock them over. And it was just basically this, like you could poop on a crate and the crate would just keep rolling through the whole map, just knocking things over, no, it's like just indefinitely. And it was a really weird bug that we almost considered like maybe we should leave that in because it's just like so dumb and so silly. And it's just I think a big element of our games is kind of like the visual humor of everything is just silly and exaggerated, and that was kind of like a perfect example of that. Just this visual chaos.
Yeah. I guess for you did start with the shameless plug, but I'm going to allow you to continue with it. What are the top three things people should know about Just Crow Things?
The top three things. I think it's a good mix of kind of like cute and adorable, but also like very chaotic. So if you either like cute things or if you like chaotic things, that's a game for you. Um, we do have a variety of different stages and environments and kind of like puzzles and challenges that kind of give you a lot of variety of you can kind of find your own fun. The way the game is designed, you have a lot of objectives and you can kind of pick and choose what you get done. So if you want something that's more challenging, there's things for that. If you want something that's more brainy and problem solving, there's that too. If you want just, collect things or just have silly mayhem, there's that too. So I think there's a good variety of experiences to find things you like doing. And then a third thing that players should know is that, yeah, use the photo mode and send us cool things. Just like with our previous game, we love seeing that stuff. We love sharing.
Yeah, I definitely can imagine lots of crazy creative things people are going to send in.
Hmm.
You talked a few years ago about your games getting pirated and
Hmm.
just in general piracy of smaller games. And I was wondering if that's something that's still been a problem today. And if so, how would you suggest like other developers who might be listening address it?
If you're an indie developer, I honestly don't think there is much you can do about it. That's no matter what, like AAA DRMs get cracked
Mm.
sometimes within a day or two. It's not realistically what, something we have the resources to stop. And I've always liked the Gabe Newell's from, Valve and Steam's idea that, piracy is not a price issue, it's a service issue. So that's kind of also how I approached our games. There's actually a kind of a secret thing that happens if you pirate our games, that it does not prevent you from playing, but it does kind of encourage you to maybe support us a little bit. So what happens is the main menu is flooded with water. You're wearing a little eye patch, and there's like pirate music playing, and there's a button asking you to maybe support our game. And that's kind of what all we do, and with the idea that trying to ask people to maybe consider supporting us if they really like the game, but knowing that it's no point trying to make the experience less comfortable for our paying customers just to stop a few pirates. And also, having grown up in Poland, it was really hard to get video games. They were really expensive, and kind of piracy growing up was just how you got games. So I think I also have that understanding, where people come from, that maybe they can't afford it, maybe they can't access it. And it's not always a malicious thing. It's a complex issue. So I try to approach it with a little bit more of empathy.
Yeah, I know that's the case in a number of countries. I know, like Brazil in particular.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough for them to get access to games. But I think that's smart. You're addressing it in like a cheeky way, like
Mm-hmm.
not a way that is condemning people who do it so much as just giving them a little nudge in a friendly way to say, hey, if you could
Mm-hmm.
support me a
Mm-hmm.
little, I'd like that.
Right.
And it's been over 10 years now since you started Unbound. And
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how you've seen the studio grow in that time and what kind of lessons you've learned.
I think, I definitely got smarter about understanding how to make good games and games that players actually want to play. My first game did kind of okay. My second was kind of a flop. And then, we were a headliner. It was a lot of learning. I think I have a much better understanding how to make games that are marketable, how to explore the different possibilities, and aside from just making the game, I'm talking about, events, in-person exhibits, console ports, physical releases, merchandising. I've gone for a lot of those steps by now and kind of have a better, lay of the land of the gaming space and the opportunities available. But it's also hard to say, just give advice, because I feel like with every release there is, something different.
Mm.
That's, the environment is just evolving so quickly and changing. On my first game, I got picked up by PC Gamer because I had a development blog. I just wrote words on a website and that got me featured.
Mm.
And today nobody cares about dev blogs anymore.
Mm.
It's I feel like, we're constantly going through transitions of, that there was press, then there was, influencers, then there was streamers. I think now a lot of game devs are seeing success from TikTok. So, it's ever evolving and ever changing. And you kind of have to constantly keep your wits about and be looking for, for instance, there was the Game Pass opportunity that helped us a lot. That wasn't a thing, a few years back, and who
Sure.
knows what's going to happen in the next few years. So honestly, you just have to constantly keep tabs on it. And honestly, a lot of lessons I've learned just by doing. And I feel like you can't learn from your mistakes until you make them. So, go out and make mistakes and then learn from them.
Great advice. Yeah, keeping up with the times and, what's relevant and where you can find success. Super important stuff. You talked also just now a little bit about porting, and on that subject, I saw you made a post where you're talking about how you made a water shader specifically for the Switch port of Rain on Your Parade, and
Hmm.
that got me thinking a lot about like what goes into porting games that most people don't realize.
So it, heavily varies by platform, and, there's only so much I can tell in specific terms because, of NDAs and things like that.
Sure.
But I think that uh, actually getting the game running on the consoles is kind of like the easy part. That you can get it up in like a week. But actually to get it run at a good frame rate and not to crash randomly and not to have really weird obscure bugs, that is where I think most of your time goes into. The Nintendo Switch is a much older console, and even at launch, it was a little underpowered. So most of my Nintendo Switch development time is just optimizing, changing shadows for things, changing resolution of textures, decreasing complexity of geometry. There's a lot of tricks we do with that where, for instance, replacing, instead of making complex trees cast a shadow, we just kind of create invisible cubes as shadow casters. What else did we do? We first make some objects not update at all if they're outside of a certain distance from player because they're not going to be visible anyway. And there's a lot of kind of edge case scenarios that maybe they run fine on PC, but on a specific console, they will not. And you're not going to know that until you run into that. So you kind of have to play for the whole game and kind of watch out which things caused issues where. For instance, in the current game, we had an issue with the leaf blower, which was not an issue on PC, but it was an issue on Nintendo Switch. So we kind of have to revisit the code and kind of optimize it just for that platform. So that's kind of like less graphical stuff and more like on the processing power. There's also sometimes really weird and obscure bugs. Like on Rainy Day Parade, we have this weird issue where like sometimes the text fonts would get corrupted. And kind of by like trial and error, I figured out that if you use the same fonts in like a screen heads-up display and you use it also in like a world, like let's say a sign on a store, then after you reload a level, that font would somehow get corrupted.
Oh.
And it was something that only happened in our specific version of Unity on on the specific Xbox with the specific, SDK we were using. And that's if we upgraded Unity, that would have gone away. Maybe in the future would have gone away. I never really quite figured out what caused it. I just made it the simplest fix possible. I just made a duplicate font and make sure we use different fonts for different cases. But it's kind of things like that, which you just have to play through it, hope you find all those weird bugs, and by the time you release, you hope that you didn't miss any. And then sometimes, you have to kind of think creatively outside of the box. How do I fix that? How does it even occur? Like at the beginning, it was like our fonts get corrupted, and I had no idea why. And it's kind of a trial and error of trying to figure like what is going on. Why did it suddenly break? It was working just 5 minutes ago. So, and of course that stuff also happens on PC, but because we develop on PC, we're constantly testing, we're constantly seeing the game. So you kind of pick up those issues as you go along. But you don't do that when you're testing on until you actually first made the console version. So you kind of have all this backlog of these random issues you just didn't know exist yet. So I think, that, all the optimization, all the testing, all those little obscure little things, that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of, porting to consoles. Everything else, like signing the user in, handling controllers, with the tools that we have today, especially using Unity and the variety of plugins like Rewired, a lot of that is, brunt of the work is handled very quickly, which I'm very thankful for.
That's good that technology is keeping up, but I love hearing those very specific, very bizarre stories of things going wrong and how developers are able to fix them. So yeah, that was pretty much all the questions I had for you, Jakub. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about today?
No, actually, I like those questions. I think they're, covered a lot of interesting sides of things. I looked a little bit at your podcast, so I know, we interviewed a variety of other interesting developers as well. So, I don't know, I guess I think that's about it. If, again, we love interacting with our players, so we have some, cool things you take in game, just tweet it at us, share it with us. If you see us at an event or an expo, come say hi, and thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy our games.
Thank you very much. That means a lot. But before we go, I have to ask, as I have asked all my other guests, this is the Pixel Pizza Podcast. Jakub Kasztalski, where is your favorite pizza place?
Where's my favorite pizza place? So right now I am in Seattle, and I think my favorite pizza place is kind of like a hole-in-the-wall place called Little Maria's. And I'm a little bit biased because it used to be a pizza place that was across the street from me when I first moved in. But I swear it's the best pizza I've had in Seattle, which, maybe isn't known for its pizza, but that's kind of would be my recommendation.
Okay, Little Maria's. Do you have a go-to topping, flavor, anything?
I like to keep it pretty classic, a good pepperoni or a supreme with, some extra like veggies on there. I think, keep it simple, keep it classic.
Absolutely, keep it classic. So you were saying people should stay in touch with you guys on social media. Where, what are the names of the accounts?
So on Twitter, it's at Unbound Creation. It's actually just singular creation because of the word limit. And then on Instagram and on TikTok, it's Crowy Game. And that's kind of where we're promoting our, latest title. And those probably are our most active channels: Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So that's probably the best place to follow us if you want updates about our games.
Great. Then I'll have links to all three of those below. And yeah, thank you so much again for joining me today.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And now we're going to head off with one more track from our chiptune artist of the week, Thefricolix. And that track is called Endzeit. So hope you enjoy that one. We'll see you next week with another Pixel Pizza.
countless billions of galaxies in the universe lies a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead. 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 Is now dead.